Hello and welcome to India's World. Afghanistan is all set to elect a new president. The incumbent, Hamid Karzai, is not allowed to contest as he has served 2 terms already. On October 6th last year, there were 27 candidates in the fray. 16 were disqualified by the Election Commission on October 22nd, leaving 11 in the field. In March this year, President Karzai's brother, Qayyum Karzai, also withdrew from the fray, followed by 2 others. The 3 candidates considered ahead among the 8 aspirants remaining are Dr. Abdullah Abdullah. He came second in the 2009 presidential election and is a former foreign minister. He was also an assistant to the legendary Tajik leader Ahmad Shah Massoud, who was murdered. The second candidate is Dr. Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai. He is a former World Bank economist and a former finance minister. And then we have Zalmay Rasool. He is another former foreign minister. There is every likelihood that the presidential race will go into a second round, which should be completed by end April or early May. To discuss what kind of candidate the Afghans might elect and the challenges before the incoming president, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, former High Commissioner of India to Pakistan and expert on the region, and you go to Afghanistan often. We have 2 former ambassadors to Afghanistan, Ambassador Vivek Karju and Ambassador Jayant Prasad. Both of you know the 3 leading candidates personally. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Parthasarathy. How important are the ethnic divisions in Afghanistan as far as the presidential election is concerned?
I think the ethnic divisions are crucial. And I think one of the things we have to be happy about really is that this is understood and respected. In any presidential slate has one non-Pashtun as the vice president. To that extent, the talk that the country would split apart on ethnic lines, the constitution and this sensibility of the parliamentarians and the politicians has avoided. So yes, I think it's very important. It's also important in terms of the balance of power, the extent of credibility you carry in your own community, and ultimately with the Pashtuns, who are the largest community.
Okay, Vivek, except for Professor Burhanuddin Rabbani, who was a Tajik, Afghanistan has always had a Pashtun president, and that too a Pashtun from the Durrani tribe from southern Afghanistan. Of the 3 leading contenders, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai comes from the Ahmadzai tribe, Zalmay Rasool is a Durrani from the south, and Abdullah Abdullah, although his father was a Pashtun and mother was a Tajik, he is not considered a Pashtun by the mainstream Pashtuns. So are we likely to see this time an Afghan president who breaks the mold of the past and will not fall into the past patterns?
First, a slight factual correction. Yeah. President Najibullah was an Ahmadzai. He was not a Durrani. Okay. Of all the candidates who are in the fray, including the ones you named, yeah. Abdullah is the only one who, while being a Pashtun, is perceived to be a non-Pashtun, as you yourself have correctly stated, and that is because, not so much because his mother was a Panjshiri Tajik, but because of his association with Ahmad Shah Massoud. Now, as of today, he is the leading candidate. Most people believe that he will, and you've said that in your commentary, that the election will go to the second round.
People expect that it will go.
That is right. As I said, most people believe this. And I dare say, given the arithmetic, that is a distinct possibility. But I, for one, will not entirely rule out the possibility that Abdullah may scrape through in the very first round. It's an unlikely possibility, but it remains, given the arithmetic of how it will work out. The real problem will arise at that stage.
Okay.
If Abdullah becomes the president or is elected the president, how will the Pashtuns react?
Yeah, we will discuss that in the subsequent discussion. Let me go back to what Ambassador Parthasarathy was saying. Every presidential candidate has two running mates, a first vice president and a second vice president.
Right.
and they have taken somebody from the other ethnicity. So Abdullah has chosen Muhammad Khan from a faction of Hizb Islami, a Pashtun, and Muhammad Muhaqiq, a Hazara. Ashraf Ghani's got General Abdul Rashid Dostum, who's Uzbek, and he's got Sarwar Danish, a Hazara. Zalmai Rasool has got a Tajik, Ahmad Zia Masood, Ahmad Shah Masood's brother, and a Hazara, Ms. Habiba Surabi as his running mates. Now, do you think including people from other ethnicities onto your slate will actually lead to inclusive politics in Afghanistan, or is it merely symbolic?
You know, till now that's been the case, Bharat. If you look at the different cabinets composed by President Karzai, he has been in the saddle now for 13 years. And he has set a kind of convention in Afghanistan of today, post-Taliban Afghanistan, that anyone who is ruling from the ARG, the presidential palace, must be a big tent person that accommodates different aspirations and different ethnicities.
Okay. Sorry.
No,
Vivek,
I think that's fine, Jen. But let's face it, the Constitution does not give any distinct powers to the vice presidents. So this is to a large extent symbolic.
Okay.
What really matters is the personalities of the vice president. Fahim did not get clout because he was the first vice president.
Marshal Fahim.
Marshal Fahim, who passed away recently, but because of who he was. So this is an important factor.
Okay. Partha, do you think, as Vivek was suggesting, that if a non-Pashtun, non-Durrani president comes in Kabul, the country would get divided along ethnic lines?
Well, let's not forget that Mullah Omar was a Ghilzai. He was not a Durrani, and he ruled, but that was with support from across the Durrani line. In fact, but this time they're going to be at loggerheads drawn with people across the Durrani line. Traditionally, if you go by traditional, from the time of Ahmad Shah Abdali, the ruling class amongst the Pashtuns have been the Durranis. So yes, a Durrani does have that added clout of an aura of legitimacy based on history. So that certainly is an advantage. And I would think that given the Pashtun challenge from the Taliban, it would be in everybody's interests that a person who has high credibility and some personal stake will be.
So you're saying a Durrani should be
but it should be preferably Durrani. Okay, but the other reason is even after he relinquishes office, behind the scenes, Ahmad Karzai is not going to go.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the presidential election in Afghanistan. Vivek, I stopped you from saying something before.
No, I find this to be a very static British view, quite frankly.
Which
that
one?
It must
Which
be
one?
a Durrani.
Okay.
Look, I can understand you if one says that it has to be a Pashtun, but among the Pashtuns you are drawing cleavages. There are cleavages. But surely if Ashraf Ghani wins, then will the Durranis rise up in revolt? I don't see that. Did they rise up in revolt against Najibullah? No. Did they rise up in revolt against Mullah Omar? No.
All right. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. Jayant, up to now, the outgoing president, Hamid Karzai, has not declared his open support for any candidate.
Right.
Although he was responsible for getting 3 of them to contest, Ashraf Ghani, Zalmay Rasool and Professor Sayyaf. But because his brother Qayyum Karzai withdrew in favor of Zalmay Rasool, can one therefore conclude that the Karzai family is putting its weight behind Zalmay Rasool? And if so, why would Karzai want to back any candidate at all?
He has not formally done so, but conventional wisdom says, exactly on the basis of what you have surmised, that the fact that Qayyum Karzai withdrew specifically in favor of one candidate, the general presumption is that President Karzai is backing that candidate, which is Zalmay Rasool.
Why?
Well, Zalmay Rasool has been a trusted aide of his who has worked very closely, and there is Why is a very easy question to answer. It comes directly from the response that Ambassador Parthasarathy had, that with Zalmay Rasool, the continuity of the Karzai policies is better assured.
Okay. All right. Ambassador Parthasarathy, if Karzai wanted a proxy president, then his brother Qayyum Karzai would have been the best bet. But it would have, perhaps would have been extremely embarrassing for him to get his brother elected. So do you think that is why he's backing Zalmay Rasool?
I think a dynastic succession, given the reputation also of his brother, was something Karzai would prefer to do without, especially as his earlier legitimacy of his second election was called into question. I think let's be realistic. He'd also like them to go in history as somebody who left and left a stable order. Zalmay Rasool is not going to ruffle any feathers. I mean, Jayant would know him better. He was very kind enough to arrange for me to meet him. I met him once later. Soft-spoken, and as I'm somehow or the other convinced that behind the scenes, given where Mr. Karzai is building his house, he will continue to be a person who counts.
Vivek, you look very unhappy with whatever the two other discussants are saying. I saw you shaking your head. So what do you have to say?
No, look, in Afghanistan, like in India, no president wants a senior person overlooking, an ex-president overlooking his shoulders.
Yes.
And in Afghanistan, more than India.
Yeah.
So I would think that if President Karzai feels that he'll have a protege, he will be grossly mistaken, including Zalmay Rasool.
Okay.
He will be his own man.
All right.
Of that, I'm fairly confident.
All right. Okay. Jayant, there were allegations of large-scale rigging in 2009. But in 2009, there was a sitting president who was contesting. He controlled the government machinery. Now, that president can no longer contest. So, can we now say, therefore, that the rigging or the possibility of rigging in favor of any particular candidate would be much less this time?
This rigging business is a little bit overblown, because look at Afghanistan. Look at the ubiquitous presence of Taliban all over the country, particularly in the east and the south. Yeah. So if there are, in Pashtun areas, 50% of the constituencies that are security sensitive, what do you expect is going to happen there? There will be no election observers who would be willing to risk their life and limb. There will be few people who would be willing to come out and vote. In fact, the opposite is also true, that there is a degree of disenfranchisement which will go hand in hand with the level of insecurity prevailing in a particular area. So this Western concern about punctiliously conducted elections is really something very hard to understand, because there are Western allies in the region that have no democracy whatsoever. And after all, we are a democracy. Can you say that each and everything that we do in elections is above board?
No, but within Afghanistan, there have been allegations that the number of voter ID cards issued is, sort of 1.5 times the total number of eligible voters. These charges are not coming from US or Western powers.
No, I have just come back from Nepal, and if you look at the debates before the elections, all the debates internally was about organization of elections and distribution of electoral cards. Yeah. So there is a problem, and that problem is associated with the fact that for the third time only in Afghan history, you are having free and fair elections or attempted to have free and fair elections in that country.
Okay, Ambassador Parthasarathy, of the top 3 candidates, 2 have been constantly expressing publicly their apprehension that there would be fraud in the election. And in fact, Abdullah Abdullah and Ashraf Ghani have said that if there's no fraud, both of them will go through to the second round. The only person who's not talking about possibility of electoral fraud is Zalmay Rasool. Does it suggest that Zalmay Rasool believes that the government machinery this time will act in his favor? Because the tacit backing of the Karzai clan.
I go along with what Jayant is saying. This doesn't worry me. This can marginally affect here or there. My real concern is the extent to which the Taliban seem determined to disrupt this election.
All right. Vivek?
That is something we should be looking at.
In my view, it will not be a perfect, but it will be a credible election.
What does that mean?
Which means that the results will be acceptable to the Afghan public at large. The Afghan electorate will accept those elections. And
what would need to happen for the Afghan public to accept the election? Would it be in terms of percentage of votes? Would it be in terms of the candidate elected?
No, it will be a general feeling in the country that these elections have, given the situation in which Afghanistan is, given Taliban violence, as Mr. Parthasarathy is saying, this election reflects at the end of the day the will of the Afghan people.
Okay.
And I think that is what the international community must look at, instead of trying to dot every I and cross every T as far as this election
So
is
imperfect
concerned.
elections are acceptable if the people accept it?
No, I think again you are trying to define these elections in terms which are peculiarly Western.
But democracy is a Western concept.
No,
it's not something that is indigenous to Afghanistan.
Let's not get into a philosophical discussion on democracy. We will go on till the cows come home. The actual fact is that there is a system of jirgas in Afghanistan, like there was a system of panchayats here. So it reflects the will of the people, and that is what the election will show.
Okay, the cows will come home for the Afghan people, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the presidential election in Afghanistan. Jayant, there were indications that the Tajik vice president who died, Marshal Fahim, was trying to work out a compromise between Zalmay Rasool and Abdullah Abdullah. From what one learns from Afghan sources is that the idea was that one of them would withdraw in favor of the other, and whoever wins would then amend the Afghan constitution and appoint the withdrawing candidate as his prime minister. Apparently, while what was being discussed was who would withdraw in favor of whom, Zalmay Rasool in favor of Abdullah Abdullah or Abdullah in favor of Rasool. But Fahim passed away in an untimely manner. Do you think that if the Tajiks want to share a power in Kabul, real power in Kabul, then Abdullah Abdullah should come to an understanding with one of the two Pashtun candidates quickly?
Well, this is very much still on the cards. Elections are just a matter of days away, 3-4 days. 5th April is the election date. But till the eve of election, the effort is on between the three candidates of two of them compromising, and then you will have a clear election day winner in the first round.
Okay.
And your presumption is correct, because the last candidate to withdraw is the grandson of King Zahir Shah, Muhammad Nadir Nadim.
Yes.
And because Zalmay Rasool was the head of the cabinet of the deposed president in Rome, you can again, conventional wisdom says he has withdrawn in favor of Rasool. So if Rasool or Ghani, the two of them come together, or if Abdullah and Rasool come together, or Abdullah and Ghani come together, the rub is, and that is where all three might be still standing in the fray on the last day, is there is no consensus emerging among the brokers that are flying between them of who should be number one and who should be number two.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Vivek, let's talk about some challenges that the new president would face. Now, Hamid Karzai refused to sign the bilateral security agreement with the Americans, and he thought he could use the Loya Jirga to back his position. He called 2,500 Afghan elders to the Loya Jirga. 50 committees were set up, and once those people realized that not signing the BSA means that they would get no economic aid, 48 or 49 committees said we must sign the BSA. So when this attempt was unsuccessful, Hamid Karzai then put his own preconditions for not signing the BSA. And now the three leading candidates have said that if they get elected, they would sign the BSA. One of them has said he would sign it on the day he gets elected. The other one has said he would sign it within a month. Now, what is it that Hamid Karzai feared and these prospective presidential candidates don't fear?
I think Mr. Karzai, one wanted to sort of project to the Afghan people that he was no Shah Shuja. For another, the relations between him and the United States simply have collapsed over the past 2 years.
They haven't been good since 2009.
Yes, but over the last 2 years, they went from bad to worse, and now they broke down completely. Mr. Karzai feels, at least he says so publicly, that the Afghans do not need help on the security front from the outside. Most people in Afghanistan, in fact all, think otherwise. They think the security challenges are such and the economic challenges are such that they need international involvement, both in the security sector as well as in the economic sector. And therefore, I think no sooner does a new president come in, then he will have no alternative but to sign this.
Mazhar Parsarthi, how essential is the BSA in maintaining security as Vivek is pointing out? And my specific question to you is, once the Americans go, or remain there in very limited number if BSA is signed, if BSA is not signed, there is a zero option, they go away completely. Then who pays the salary of the Afghan National Security Force? And would desertions go up in ANSF and security situation would be messy?
It's interesting. This is the first time that you are having such a large Afghan army, which is not largely made up of conscripts. This is a volunteer army to whom you are paying. I think if you go by the Tokyo process and the funds pledged, which will not come, generally nobody in the West or elsewhere wants this government to collapse. They'll do their best to meet the costs of these people staying. Can they manage? I go entirely without the foreign aid. They go along. I go along with Vivek. Absolutely not. Because I'll tell you what is the greater worry for them. The greater worry is that even the way the Americans are presently looking at their needs, they're looking at their needs on the presumption that the Taliban will be equipped as they are. I have no doubt in my mind that once the Americans leave and the combat front, the ISI will up the level of military assistance to the Taliban. So I think where India and the others have to watch is to see that they give an elected government, the world gives the elected government a fair chance to fight and stay in power.
All right, we're running out of time, but I've got one last question for you, Jayant. What was Hamid Karzai expecting, or what does he still expect out of the Dubai process of talking to the Taliban? Is there a possibility, as some people say, that he may still get a few top Taliban commanders to come out and make a statement in favor of the political process with their own conditions, of course? They may not support this presidential election, but it is expected that he might be able to get some people to support the parliamentary election which comes next year.
Absolutely no chance of that happening at all, Bharat. It's out of the question, because unless the Taliban disjoin organizationally and ideologically from Al-Qaeda and their associates, there is no hope. There is only one condition on which Taliban will come to a settlement. That is when they find that the future government of Afghanistan has its own forces and can stand up to the Taliban. And when Taliban realizes they can't take over Kabul, which is ruled by Afghans themselves without external physical assistance, it is at that point of time, like the Maoists in Nepal, that they will come to a settlement.
One sentence. I think as far as India is concerned, we must do everything in our power to consolidate the central authority in Afghanistan. I, for one,
when you say everything, what should we do?
We have a strategic partnership agreement, and we must respond to Afghan requests, including for arms and ammunition, without refracting them through the prism of our Pakistan policy. That is what I mean. I have, for one, no doubt that Pakistan will go all out to support the Taliban to not only get as much territory as they can in southern and eastern Afghanistan, but also to make a bid for power in Kabul. And the Taliban, my last point, the Taliban are no gentlemen who will be susceptible to sharing power. They'll want it all.
I entirely agree with Vivek. I have not a word to add. I think the real danger is the Pakistanis stepping up, as I said, assistance to the Taliban. I want to say that the Indian response to Afghanistan's plaintive cry for weapons has been very disappointing.
Pathetic.
All right. I don't know how many of our viewers agree with the suggestion that we should be arming the Afghans, but thank you very much for coming here and analyzing the situation. Let's hope the election takes place peacefully and there's a clear victor and there's stability in Kabul and in entire Afghanistan. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.